Welcome to E360 TV, the live streaming and on-demand destination for influential voices and enlightened audiences. We offer trending, grassroots, and purpose-driven content across a diverse range of interests. E360 TV is more than just watching programs. We offer the ability to interact with live shows connecting audiences to real, authentic influencers and storytellers while streaming to millions of devices. Real experiences. Raw conversation. One destination for it all. E360 TV.
Veterans are the lifeblood of American freedom, serving in some of the harshest situations to secure that freedom across the globe. This is the Lounge with Legends show, celebrating their transformation from battlefield to business. The Lounge with Legends show with Marty the Moac Martinez and James A. Phelps, a.k.a. Spartan 6.
Hello and welcome to this week's installment of Lounge with Legends on E360 TV. As you notice, it's just me today. Over here is usually my Ranger buddy, James A. Phelps, Spartan 6. But as you mentioned last week, they had his mother-in-law passed away. So he's there with his family, taking care of them. So our thoughts and prayers from the Lounge with Legends family go out with him during this time. This has been a wonderful week since last weekend when we all were together with Lamont Christian. Since then, this weekend, we had just so much exciting stuff going on. So many new people we've met, especially during COVID. It's kind of a weird time. Because you start building these friendships and you realize it's just like this. I actually haven't physically met this person. So this weekend, we fixed a lot of that. We had the Lauren Michaels Harris from Bathrobe Moments came in. He was doing a photo shoot with Virginia Rose Hodges for his photo shoot for the cover of Shift magazine, which is Dr. Rob Garcia, the warrior strategist. So we got to meet them, and he brought with him Daniel Echeverria of the Weekly Dose of Dano, also on E360 TV. So he came in with Sebastian Torres, had a wonderful dinner with James because he came up for the footies event that we had, and my wife was there. So it was just it was a great dinner here in the DC area. And then on Saturday, fun-filled day, we had my daughter had her first communion. So my day started at 5:30 to get everything ready for our vendor event with Veterans Grow America, Veterans Grow Virginia, and the Rosie Network. They hosted a huge vendor event with about 30 different veteran-owned small businesses at Fort Belvoir, Virginia. And so I had to get everything ready for that. was in my suit because right after I set up, I had to run over and go to my daughter's first communion. We did first communion. It was a wonderful experience. But then I left and went back to Fort Belvoir, continued to set up. James was holding down the fort, getting everything set up. And then we started our event. And somewhere around, I think, noon, I finally got to change. So it was pretty neat. We got to meet with Triple Nickel. They're going to be on the show in, I think, 2 or 3 weeks. So Triple Nickel will be here, but they were there. Annette Wittenberger with a wild ride called Life. She's doing wonderful things in the world of post-traumatic stress and mental health. Her podcast deals with that, and so that you don't suffer in silence. It's amazing. Check it out. It's called A Wild Ride Called Life. So she was there selling her stuff. Don Dodson was there selling his leather goods. The popcorn guy, I always lose the popcorn guy. Every time we come, I swear we get about 4 bags. He's here in the Woodbridge area. But Donnell did a great event. We're working to get Donnell and the Rosie Network here on Lounge with Legends and get them in the lounge. But this week, we've got an amazing guest. We have Clarke Cooper. I'm looking over here because I'm trying to manage a couple different screens here, so I apologize. Clarke Cooper is a good friend of mine, family friend, such a family friend. He was at my son's baptism. Him and Mike were there. It was amazing. Clarke, I wanted to have him on the show because he's going to bring a totally different perspective from what I think each one of our legends brings a different perspective, but he's bringing a national security diplomatic service kind of that you don't get on most of the shows. But Clarke is and I'm reading the bio, so bear with me. National security executive, intergovernmental affairs expert, and a combat veteran. He's currently the senior director of the Guard Hill House, LLC, and a non-resident senior fellow with the Atlantic Council. Now, this is pretty interesting. Clarke served as the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs from 2019 to 2021. Dang. Where he led a global enterprise of 500 personnel and on an annual basis oversaw $170 to $190 billion in arms sales and $16 billion in security assistance. That's billion with a B. That's pretty big. He also served as a director of intel planning for Joint Special Operations Command here in the National Capital Region. And he's got decades of experience in diplomatic, intergovernmental roles, served our nation in a lot of different manners. And here's what I always thought was pretty neat. So Clarke's going to come on. He's going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff, but I don't want this to get away. He was an assistant director of National Park Service. What doesn't this guy do? I'm telling you, this is so amazing. Every time he sent me his bio, I thought I knew Clarke. I read his bio. I'm like, I didn't know that. And he's got these accolades in here from current President Joe Biden back when he was a senator, Mike Pompeo. Duh, of course he's going to give him a big high five on that one. Jeb Bush, and it goes on and on. So honored and excited to have Clarke on. Let me quit talking about him and just get him on the show, and let's get it started.
Hey, Marty.
Welcome to the lounge.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Afternoon. It's glad you're here. And again, we're so honored that we were able to get you on the show because you've got such a unique story. And we're excited. And James is really wanted to be here, but he's doing what he needs to do.
That's right.
As a spouse.
Yep.
And as a dad. So he's doing the right thing. He's going to try to get on here. I said, no cameos. You focus and be on the family. So,
yeah. But
Clarke, wow, that bio, man, it goes on and on. I think there's like 10 more pages. I couldn't get to all of it. It's such a great thing. What was this call to serve? When did you notice that? Was that when you were started off in the Boy Scouts? What kind of built this drive in you?
Well, scouting certainly has something to do with it, and something broader. I mean, there's an overarching element here that I share with you, I share with James, and many of our friends. You know, there's a combination of the application of our faith, the dedication and focus on our family, and then also our fitness, and that's in the sense of physical and mental fitness. We could talk a little bit more about that. But as far as a call to service. I mean, this is really deeply rooted, going generations back, and we've had a multi-generational commitment, be it in the state or national service. And my family, that can take form in military service. There are a number of us that have served, going back in as far as into the 1600s. It could be public office, certainly a balance of private sector life and community engagement. I mean, that's something I think we're seeing a lack of today, is the lack of community engagement where people are involved in community or civic organizations. But on the military side, yeah, gosh, no kidding. The first KIAs, or killed in action, from my family were during the King Philip's War. For those of you who aren't history fans, this is in the late 1600s. This is before there was a United States. But as I told my NCO, Sergeant First Class Grist in Iraq, I do not want to be Lieutenant Dan. I want to come home with my legs. I want to come home alive, with all in one piece. But no, I mean, seriously, like my late father and others in my family, to paraphrase John Adams, and I'm referring to John Adams, the elder. Mm-hmm. Essentially, our obligations to our country do not cease, but with our lives, right? So what does that mean? It means that you never stop.
Right.
It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop with one's retirement. It doesn't stop with one's DD-214. It does not stop when one transitions. And that's why I mentioned community engagement beyond. So, again, that's a whole nother topic of conversation, but that is a generational challenge of our time, is people in their late 40s, we look behind us, who's in American Legion, who's in the Elks Lodge, who's in Junior League, who's in Women's Club, you name it. The boomers are there ahead of us. But I do challenge the millennials and younger of, you talk about being socially connected, and one refers to platforms like this, but where are they physically in the community? And as pandemic protocols open up, I do look to see more people present in their community, because being connected globally on virtual platforms, while interesting and certainly informative, much of one's investment in the community starts at home. And I do have a part of that in many different ways. But to your question about call to service, again, it's rooted, again, across generations. It's not limited to military, but yes, we've been carrying a spear. We carried it for the crown, and now we're carrying it for the eagle, so to speak.
That's an interesting couple of different points that you've mentioned about the difference in the generations in serving the community. Start local, think global kind of thing, but that calling to serve. And I think that touches on, once we leave the military, we immediately notice that the bonds aren't necessarily there. We've lost something, and a way to find it is to serve your community, serve the others, join the American Legion. American Legion Post 1 here in DC, I think, is by far the best. I'm biased, but Clarke and I and others are members of it, so that's why we're biased. But you can do that. You can join the VFW. There's other things that you can do to hang out with your veteran brothers and sisters and continue to serve the community and our nation. And I think you're right, Clarke. There's we are missing some of that. And
it takes work. It takes work, right? So Alexis de Tocqueville observed in late 18th century, early 19th century. I mean, he did several interesting observations and studies of the American people. And at the time, he said we were a nation of joiners, which certainly would be accurate several hundred years ago, and actually would be accurate well through the 20th century. When you look at all the different affinity groups and civic organizations, I mean, we mentioned some of them here, most of them military related, but when you look at civic groups like Rotary, Kiwanis, Optimist, you name it, all of those things, I mean, you couldn't drive into a town in America, and still can't, without seeing a host of signs saying, welcome to Smallville, and you've got all these organizations. The challenge today is the viability of the organization. So while it's easy to click like, and it's easy to sign or ascribe something online, it is work to be with other people. And that is something, when it comes with a frustration, not just in a professional environment, but in volunteer organizations. I mean, who hasn't always loved every single person next to them in the pew at church or at synagogue or temple? I mean, look, that's part of the challenge of being in a community, is that not everybody to your left or right of you is somebody you want to hug it out with. But if we're going to be successful and prosper as a nation, we do need to be able to be in the same room with people who may not look like us, and who may not even share the same ideology or politics as us. And so again, the call for being able to be better self is, again, that local focus before taking on the world per se.
Now, I think you're spot on when you're talking about having to cohabitate with others around you. You may not agree with 100% of your brothers and sisters, your neighbors, and people you don't even know, but you have to find a way to cohabitate, especially as a nation. And I think that the one thing about the military is that we are a good, well, what some would say a microcosm of American society. Others would say, no, not really, because we're kind of usually the test case for some American policies. But I don't know. What do you think about that?
If anything, I think the military is an exceptional example. I think when we as a country look at what we aspire to be, and so I am concerned about some today in 2021 wallowing in wokeness, so to speak. Yes, there are imperfections in our history, but we strive as a nation to improve and to be better, and we strive to be a nation truly a meritocracy where everyone has the ability to succeed. But there is no guarantee to success, and I think that's one of the things we need to be careful as we seek to make the nation truly realize its intent, its design, which is a nation for all, for freedom and justice for all. But we need to take great care that we don't redact and deny our history, and we need to take great care that we don't reduce or make the playing ground or the access to the point that it is tipped where we're not talking about equality, because equality is not a guarantee. What equality means is equal access, not equal outcomes. Equal access. There's a big difference between equal access and equal outcomes. The beauty about this country is we have the freedom to succeed. We also have the freedom to fail, but we also have the freedom after failure to recoup and begin again. Again, being a native-born American from a family that's been here for several hundred years, there are a lot of ups and downs, or chutes and ladders, so to speak, in my family tree. And possible because we live in a country like the United States versus in a country where a caste system or a very defined class stratification would make it impossible for one to recover from particular adversities.
I think it's interesting you talk about the wokeness, which is all about racial injustice, inequalities, perceived slights, real, unreal. I'm not going to argue that. That's not my place. But I think that we all suffer from, or most all have encountered some sort of prejudice. And it's how we deal with that. When I was in the military, one of the things I loved was being an Army Ranger, being in a special operations unit. But I wasn't always thanked for being there. And it was because I'm Hispanic, because I'm Mexican. And there were people, not all, it was a great unit, but there's just a few in there that made my life a living hell because I'm Mexican. And what I had to realize as an 18-year-old who coming from Texas, they don't like me because I'm Mexican. Dude, I'm from San Antonio. Everyone's Mexican. So this was a new thing for me. This kind of prejudice. Now I understood why my parents wouldn't teach me Spanish growing up, because they didn't want me to speak with an accent, and so it became real. But I think as we're entering this wokeness, people also need to understand that we all have suffered from some sort of prejudice, whether you're Black, whether you're Asian, whether you're Hispanic, or you as in the LGBT community, you lived under don't ask, don't tell. And then you came out and you lived on both sides of it. So that's something interesting, because I would look at you and say, he's a white guy. He doesn't know anything about prejudice. He doesn't know anything about people not letting him be. So I guess my thing is, don't be so quick to judge people by a book by its cover. Instead, we need to look and celebrate our common denominators, which is being American. But would you mind talking a bit about, kind of a unique perspective of living don't ask, don't tell on both sides of the fence and at the different levels that you've been at?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first let's go back to ability and talent, right? So everyone realized that you were a Mexican by some Mexicans,
right?
But doers, being able to adapt and overcome adversity, and we have many examples of that in the rich fabric of our nation's history. Recently, former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice was asked if she thought the United States was a racist country. She said, absolutely not. She talked about the challenges that she encountered growing up in the segregated South. And remember, she was a little girl when the bombings occurred in Birmingham. I mean, so this was a very real part of her growing up experience, but it did not keep her down. And so, yes, there are elements of exclusion that have existed in our country's history that still exist in many places. But that's why I go back to, one should not wallow in wokeness, because if we're truly talking about equal access to opportunity, we have to be careful not to say or infer that means an equal outcome, because that is not going to be the case.
Absolutely.
And to paraphrase a favorite amongst those who like to listen to NPR, the world is not like Wobegon. All the children are not perfect, right? And that means not everybody has particular skill sets or capabilities, and that's okay. But what's not okay is people being shut out from the opportunity to seek success. People should not be shut out from the opportunity to seek a way of life. So no, to your observation about don't ask, don't tell, horrible law, and some at the time, and this is a Clinton era statute, thought it was a compromise to say, look, what we'll do is we won't ask as long as service members won't tell. Well, that's really how it didn't work out. It didn't shake out that way. Fortunately, we've moved past that, and very quickly, mind you. Congress, it was a bipartisan repeal of that law in 2010. And here we are 11 years later, and younger servicemen and women have no idea.
Right. No
idea as to why that was a big deal. And to give you an example why how long it's been, Major General Tammy Smith, Army General, just retired recently. Well, she's a very visible example in the general officer ranks of somebody who most of her career was under don't ask, don't tell, and she, blessedly was able to retire openly with her spouse next to her. And you've got some other interesting examples out there today. The XO over at the Marine Corps barracks. You have a colonel over there who, again, a good chunk of his career. So the best part of it is that it's a non-issue. It's completely non-issue. What is an issue is one's ability to be deployable and fit. Chairman Mattis, when he was chairman of Joint Chiefs, predecessors like Admiral Mullins, their big focus was on capability and deployability, right? So, to put it colloquially, if somebody's a shitbag and they can't pass a physical fitness test, well, it doesn't matter what their color is. It doesn't matter what their sex is. It doesn't matter what sexual orientation is. But if they're capable and deployable, then one should not be precluded from service. So, looking backwards, that certainly was a ridiculous moment in our country's history. But to your observation about the military leading the way, look, the United States military was integrated before the 1964 Civil Rights Act.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Before. It certainly was a place where one could actually truly find opportunity, even if it was denied them in certain parts of our country when our country had segregation laws on the books, in particularly in southern states. And it is interesting to see that the military historically installations have been what I called islands of equality. And some people have asked me, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, if you look pre-64, if one happened to have been a Black service member, you were equal in your work. You had equal access to the commissary. If you had dependents, your children went to an integrated school on post. You also had equal access to facilities like the Officer Club or the NCO Club. There were no segregated facilities, be it at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, or Fort Benning, Georgia, which were both in states where segregation was in place. Fast forward to the 21st century, in early days of repeal, one of the things I mentioned to my spouse, he's currently an active duty lieutenant colonel. At the time, I said to him, I was like, what's crazy about this is that in Fayetteville, I am a second-class citizen. As soon as I enter the gate, as soon as I go through the controlled access point at Fort Bragg, I am fully equal. I'm equal before the law. I'm equal before my peers and my colleagues here at Fort Bragg. And you and I are spouses. Mm-hmm. Now, fortunately, the Supreme Court ruling had changed that. So now we're equal. We're across the land. But it was an interesting moment in time before the 2015 ruling where, if one happened to be in the LGBT community as a service member, there were some reflections as to what had transpired as far as the military being not only the vanguard, but as I said, military installations being essentially islands of equality.
Yeah, no, that's it. And that's what I really was hoping you would address, because we often get so lost in our perception of the world. Our worldview is askew from where we're standing, and we forget to look at it from other people's perspectives. And we got a comment here from Dan Hawkins, America. And I think that's exactly how he would say it, America. But,
amen. Because I go back to, look, as we strive to be the better Americans, better neighbors, better family members, friends, and citizens.
Right.
We should not apologize for the beauty that is the idea of America. And again, I am worried today that there is so much attention on what people may find being aggrieved by our history or moments in history, and seeking to prosecute that in a fashion that may really, really tear at the fabric of the foundation of this country, and potentially put at risk our trajectory as a nation amongst states in the world. Because, there may be a roster at the United Nations, but again, as I said, like in Lake Wobegon, not all the children are perfect. And at the UN, not all the states are perfect. And the United States has a leadership role in the world. It is incumbent upon us to remain a leader in the world. But we put that at risk when we start going backwards and looking at repealing or tearing down what I would consider foundational elements of the building of this nation. And so, yes, there certainly have been challenges for a number of communities to succeed. But remember that the foundation of our nation is that it's opportunity and it's justice before the law for all Americans. And while that is, as we strive toward that, we should not, again, be weighed down by wokeness.
Right. Let's go ahead and end the first half on that note and switch over to the commercials. And it'll be a good capture of what life is like on the installations. You'll get to see the vendor event from this weekend, and just look for the diversity. Look at everybody there, all these veteran-owned small businesses. So it's kind of fortuitous that we have this discussion and we're about to show this commercial. So we'll be back in 2 minutes. Go grab some coffee and we'll be right back.
Go to the Iron Mike.
You're watching the Lounge with Legends TV show with your hosts, Marty Martinez and James A. Phelps.
Wow. What a great first part part of the episode. We talked about a lot of topics that I think need to be discussed more in the nation, and less keyboard warriors, and actual have a conversation, have the dialogue with your neighbors, and keep that open mind. I think one of the things, if you could turn back time and go back and talk to 18-year-old Clarke about what you know now, what advice would you give him based on your military service, your time in working in politics and the State Department, everything you've seen? What would that advice be?
Right. Well, again, if I go back to 18-year-old Clarke, right, we're talking about a different time. I probably would have said to him, look, keep driving, keep pumping it, keep rucking, keep rowing, which is what I did. But just do a little bit more of it, as in like, look, don't be distracted, and also know that who you are is how God created you. I was very fortunate that I had people around me, and this is like why communities are important, right? So my faith community, not just clergy, but members of our parish, of course, family members. I was very, very fortunate that there was reaffirming evidence of the fact that not only am I born the way God created me, but that is part of His plan. And so, and I know people today, the discussion isn't so much about what one's faith is. I mean, there's a whole interesting set of statistics out there, people who don't even have a particular identity of faith, and that has changed tremendously in the past few decades.
Right.
But for those of us who do, I look at that as, and that probably is what kept me alive. And kept me going. And one could apply that for a number of people's personal experiences where they've had to keep driving. But yeah, I would certainly probably would say what I did here. The challenges, of course, teenagers, what are they,
Right.
listening or that. And so, I look back and think, thank God I had very positive examples and influences in my life that were there. So I talk about being present. We need to be present with each other. We need to be present with those that are near and dear to us. We need to be present to those what I can call concentric rings of community, right? Not just your family, but also, family could also be, your kin, but it also can be your family of friends. Marty, you've talked about this. James has talked about this before on and offline about that kinsmanship that we have. And Sebastian Junger captures it beautifully in his book called Tribe. And that is something that is hard to find when one leaves combat or one leaves extended deployments, in that one's tribe, where's my tribe? And that's why having affinity or affiliation, be it with one's, again, church, synagogue, or temple, or community organization, is important when one transitions, because we need each other. And the pandemic has amplified the need for those affiliations. So, tribal sometimes can be used in a pejorative when we're talking about politics, but the truth is it's not. There's an innate human need to be with others.
Right. Now, I think that's, and it's, you hit on a few points of, you got to remember, regardless of what your religion is, whatever, if you worship a stone, whatever it is, you have to build your spiritual foundation. You have to build your mental and your physical. And those are three things that you just hit on. Because I think once you leave the service, sometimes we go to a dark place, we lose our way, we have whatever. But if you've done that, if you have those touchstones where you can go back to, it'll get you through the moments, dark moments where you're questioning whatever's running through your head. You can go back to that. And that has to start young. And if it doesn't, at least find a mentor, find somebody who can help you find your way. And that's kind of, to turn the question to what I would tell myself is just that is, I lost religion for a while, and something about combat makes you believe in the Lord again. Bullets whizzing by, you're like, you know what? That's something I was telling James about. Is I remember after every firefight or IED blast we were in that we were able to walk away from, there's always that moment, and it's such a pure moment that where I've seen my soldiers, looking in our striker vehicle, looking in the Humvees and stuff that we've made it out. And they always say, I'm going to marry that girl. I'm going to go buy that car. I'm going to do whatever it is. That's such a pure moment because you've just basically had a brush with death. And so it's always interesting to see what it is that really speaks to those people. But my moment was going back and finding religion. And now that's how I'm raising my children to do that. But, Clarke, let's switch gears a little bit. What are you doing these days? Now with the Guard Hill estate and the Atlantic Council. You got some other things cooking here. What are you doing these days?
Yeah, so the house is also an office. It's also a consultancy.
For all of us.
I don't know how creative it really was to name a consultancy after a landmark, but we reside here. My office is here. This served as an official residence when I was Assistant Secretary of State. The office I'm speaking to you from was my home office, which became extremely active when the pandemic made it so that I couldn't always be on the road abroad, and it meant that there were times I could not be even at the department. So considering that I was already working here and that this location actually has a historic, and recent as well as 19th century history going back to the Monroe administration, it just seemed pretty easy to make the LLC, to make the consultancy Guard Hill House, because much has happened here then, and much is happening here now. It is a little bit broader than just what I would say on traditional national security, in the sense of when one thinks of very tangible either elements that would be associated with security assistance, security cooperation, or conventional physical security. Much of what we do here, while it does include that, it includes some other elements that may not be seen by some as part of security. What am I talking about? I'm talking about development issues when we're looking at sustainability for the planet. And access to resources where that is greatly needed. One particular condition that is shared amongst the different elements in the interagency in the United States when we're looking at conditions that need to be addressed, or conditions of risk for U.S. interest, are things like military-aged males. Why? Well, if they're unemployed or underemployed, that certainly is a risk for any particular community or state, and it certainly could be a risk to our interest. I mention that as just one tangible example because when one looks at development work and access to resources, those are some of the things, without blind confidences, those are some of the things that Guard Hill House LLC is working on. So that, resources, oftentimes I think get heavily focused on when we're talking about production in the sense of industrial use or consumer goods. Yes, that would be applicable. Resources that would be necessary for armaments or electronics. Yes, that's applicable. But resources can also be something as basic as potable water. And that is something that is certainly going to be a required focus as we go into the next decades. It's not new in certain strategic circles. If one looks at a number of strategic studies amongst member states of the United Nations, water resources certainly has been in the forefront. And if anybody has lived in certain states where there's been significant work when it comes to water resources and salination levels of water, how it impacts aquifers and agriculture, states like my home state of Florida is a perfect example with the comprehensive Everglades restoration plan. That was a decades-long plan that was really pushed to fruition by then Governor Jeb Bush. And there are other states, California's another one, where water resources are really making forcing functions for decisions on planning and development. And on a global scale, that certainly is going to tie directly to national security interests. So those are some, in a broad brush space of some of the work that is being done here. So, pulling from, I would say projects that exist in many spaces, helping bring to fruition some projects that may have taken a pause in some places in the government, and then also bringing to light some new opportunities where either parts of the private sector or the U.S. government have yet to fully realize. And the beauty of this is that we mentioned freedom earlier. I have the freedom to pursue different pieces of the portfolio at my leisure, and that's actually been really fun.
You definitely have a lot of different things that you've been exposed to, worked on. That's unique from the average Joe. And so my question is, speaking about Joe, is what would you say were the greatest things that you learned in the military that have helped you transition? Because I'm sure you had some tough negotiations when you were with the State Department, when you were working with the Everglades, when you were working with your MI, military intelligence stuff. What are some of those things where you go, you know what, there's one thing, two things that I always go back to that I learned at, officer basic course or whatever it is?
Yeah, no, I mean, you said it. So, it could be anything from an access sustainment agreement, a visiting forces agreement, a status of force agreement. Any of the bilateral agreements certainly have their share of frustrations. Heck, it could even be something that's an internal discussion at somewhere like the Department of State on developing a strategy for a particular region. Looking back at the development of the Indo-Pacific strategy, the Eastern Mediterranean strategy, all of those had many fathers and mothers and a lot of hands. And I like to say, looking at the different places I've served, state or at defense entities, in a very general sense, state colleagues, which is a blessing and a curse, are extremely collaborative, very collaborative. Right. But that can have a fault, because when it comes time to implement or make a decision, one can collaborate forever without actually reaching an end state. And that I have found challenging. So to your question about what did I find beneficial, planning backwards, building out lines of effort that actually have tangible metrics and accountability. And that certainly, again, without belying confidences or clearances, I mean, that was one of the benefits last go at state, is that I wasn't the only person there that had either served directly in the military or worked with the military, maybe embedded or what have you. But seeing an acceptance in being more decisive and actually allowing for accountability right? I mean, one of the things about the military, again, it goes back to the equal access to succeed or fail, is accountability on one's responsibility. And so those are things where I see now. If you talk about very specific training, sure, developing a targeting cycle, doing all the work that's necessary in the military decision-making process, MDMP. Heck, I mean, one can apply MDMP on deciding who's going to redo the copper roof on this 200-year-old building that I work and live in. So all of that, I would say, can apply not only in work, but also in life. So decision-making, planning backwards, building out lines of effort, all of those things I found certainly fruitful, because, what's a persistent frustration point, I think, for a number of us, for you, for a number of colleagues who have transitioned into the private sector, is being in organizations awash with brilliant ideas, brilliant concepts, but lacking concrete implementation steps.
Right.
That is where men and women who have served can bring to the table, is to say, yes, these are all wonderful, and how do we get to that desired end state? How do we identify ways to meet those goals? And I think that's what veterans certainly, in a very general sense, bring to offer to business and to other organizations in the U.S. government.
No, that's such a great answer. I love it. It touches on so many different things, and it goes back to, I mean, again, we talked about MDMP and the process, and that's part of it. Is we're taught process, whether it's for targeting cycle, whether it's for military decision making, whether et cetera, et cetera. There's a process, and that's what we now can transition to, whatever we're doing on the outside, whether, like you said, replacing the roof or making a cup of coffee. There's always a process for it. So we're coming to the top of the hour, back to the top of the hour. So I want to ask you, Clarke, like I ask all of our legends that enter the lounge, and especially with you being such a lifelong service to our great nation, and with your spouse, you've served and you've sacrificed, and you've missed Christmases, and et cetera, et cetera. You've done so much for our great nation. What does freedom mean to you?
Well, in America, it means that we have the freedom to succeed or fail. Freedom to seek one's success in the United States is possible because of rule of law, because we have equal opportunity, because we have open markets, and frankly, we also have a very robust national security enterprise that provides us the ability to be free, to express ourselves, to be able to peacefully assemble, and actually to move about freely. I'm not sure many Americans appreciate the freedom of interstate travel without having to go through a checkpoint to go from one state to the other. The freedom to be entrepreneurial, right. And also even the freedom to enjoy the ability to reinvent oneself. Again, there are very few places in the world where one can actually start over, or one is not limited by their ancestry. Like I said, looking backwards, I mean, one of the blessings and the curses of being in a place for several hundred years is you can see some very interesting challenges in a family tree. And the United States allows for one to actually pursue their desires and their dreams. But again, there's no guaranteed outcome. And that is the beauty of freedom. It's also the risk of freedom. I certainly wouldn't want to have it any other way. Again, no guaranteed outcomes, but individual freedom also comes with individual responsibility. And as fellow citizens, it is incumbent upon us to actually do our part. And again, I'd like to remind everyone that our service to our country doesn't end with service in uniform. It doesn't end with service in a public office. Service to your country is actually a lifetime commitment, like it or not. And it takes a lot more than clicking like or a group on a social media platform. It is lifelong. And that is why I have said, that simple maxim that John Adams put out there, our obligation doesn't end, but with our lives.
Right. I'm going to tell Isabella that you were quoting John Adams and see how she reacts. So,
and an Army guy quoting Adams too. So.
My daughter's least favorite president is John Adams because he's the father of the Navy, and then she always ends it with "Go Army, beat Navy." So that's an Army brat for you,
right?
Clarke,
well, we're a very white family, so even though we're Army heavy, all branches have been covered at some point.
Right, Clarke, I thank you for coming on the show, being our legend this week, and allowing us to celebrate your veteran success. And sir, I thank you for your service. And any parting words real quick before I end the show?
Onward and upward.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you. What a great episode with Clarke. We had such a great time talking about a myriad of topics. Again, these are topics that we want to put out there for our veterans to see that we do have wounds, we do have scars, we've been through a bunch of things, but we can continue to be successful as we go forward. Next week, we're going to celebrate Bill Zinkgraf from the SBTI company. He's a CEO, and we went to college together, so he's a fellow Bobcat from Texas State University. We'll tune in next week, and hopefully we'll have Spartan 6 back. Thanks for tuning in, and if you like this, please consider liking and subscribing our YouTube channel. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.
You've been watching The Lounge with Legend show on E360 TV, countering the narrative that veterans are all broken misfit toys. Veterans are the lifeblood of American freedom. Serving in harsh situations, coupled with their training, have forged them into some of the most resilient and capable leaders in the world. And that's where we come in, celebrating the success stories, taking you on a journey of transformation from military to business. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll be back soon. But find us on Facebook at Lounge with Legend or at JTF214. Till next time.